where four forces, mobile, social, big data, and cloud, are merging together to create a new platform of innovation. So social is a really important one here because I think it's an example of the growing emphasis on a network of nodes, of information, of people, of documents, of processes, where organizations can maximize the value in productivity, in collaboration and processes. And there are, an enormous amount of opportunities for organizations to leverage this aggregation of information. So next to me, we have some great leaders within the industry, and I'd like to give them all the opportunity to introduce themselves, and what they cover, and who they represent. Kathryn, please.
Great. I'm Kathryn Everest. I'm a strategist at Jive Software, and we help people work better together, and happy to be here.
My name is Maddison. I'm representing Unify. I'm the product owner of Circuit.
Hi everyone, my name is Raj Mistry. I run the solutions engineering team for Salesforce in EMEA. Salesforce, as you probably all know, was a company that was born social, mobile, agile, and cloud, so really pleased to be here.
Hi, Richard Ellis from Microsoft, here today to talk about our enterprise collaboration strategies. I look after the Office division in the UK, which covers everything from Office 365 right through to Project and Visio and everything in between.
And I'm Stuart McRae, social business evangelist with IBM. So I help our clients understand how they can do business transformation using new tools. And if I'd known you were going to put the pictures at the back, I'd have worn a yellow jacket so you could identify me.
All right. So thank you, everyone. So I think we can start off with the first question is really, what is your view on enterprise social collaboration? There are, quite a diverse set of perspectives on this. I think everyone here comes from a different background in terms of where the legacy is. Kathryn, could you please express from Jive's perspective what enterprise social collaboration is?
Well, for us, it's really the mechanism for helping organizations work better together. We are a very human-centric approach, a very people-centric approach to collaboration. And we are talking about something called work style within the organization, and we recognize that not everybody has the same work style. So what that means is that people come into social collaboration in a very different way with very different expectations. And it's really important to meet people where they are. So to be able to have a mechanism where they can both connect, communicate, and collaborate socially in their own work style, we think is really important.
All right. Paul?
I think what Kathryn said absolutely spot on. But I think today, enterprise social is so often another silo. It's somewhere else where you have to think, oh, I need to go and check that and keep on top of that and get introduced to that. And we're seeing that with far too many solutions that are out there, that they are these siloed, separate things. I think the premise of enterprise social is really about bringing together people in a very natural way, breaking down those organizational barriers that we see in place and getting people together on their terms to collaborate, to work together, to become more smarter, if that's the right use of the word smarter, don't know what that is, to really come together and work. And also linking to what you were saying there, not just with people, with this whole collection of other entities and things like documents that are out there.
I think just building on what the other two speakers have said, I think enterprise collaboration to me is I just have to look at my kids. These are people that don't use email, that don't use phones. We have to start to understand how that we collaborate and we actually function in a very different way. And it's not just about how we do that within our organizations, but also outside of our organizations. How do ecosystems form? How do customers interact with us as individuals? Because we are now being trained to work in a social way. How do the companies that we interact with work in a social way? And I think it's that extension now of just the way we operate, both internally and externally, is driving what collaboration or social enterprise really means.
Right. I think Stuart and Richard, you both come from a background where well, obviously IBM and Microsoft have huge email platforms and have been facilitating the collaboration space for some time. I can imagine that from a deployment perspective, the discussion around social collaboration could often, go into new directions. You maybe describe, in your view, how those discussions go with customers in expressing the value of social collaboration.
Do you want to go?
I go first. So I think it's really important to start from the perspective of the business and what it's trying to do. If you think about great technology, think about what Apple does. It's about designing from the user's needs in rather than from the information, knowledge, content you have out. So to me, that's about getting knowledge that's currently sitting unused in documents in people's heads and getting that into motion, making it available to the rest of the organization. How do we provide access to the right experts whenever they're needed? How do we provide access to content? Instead of having a few hundred documents with lots of stuff in no one can find, what I want is 100 wiki pages, 1,000 blog posts, and 1 million status updates all there as the target of my analytic engine, which will go and find the 3 bits of information you need to do your job better. How do we make that sort of transformation is really the conversations we're having.
Yeah, just to build on that, I think actually having a widely used, intense email system is not actually a hindrance to collaboration and social. We're taking machine learning to really take that intelligence you have in that system, not the content, the documents, the email itself, but mapping relationships of people. Using that to drag it into machine learning and using that to power things like the Office graph to drive more relevance to end users. So whether your first place you go is Yammer or email shouldn't matter, but when we begin to surface information to end users, we want to map relationships, and you just need people collaborating whichever space they feel more comfortable to do that. So I think machine learning and helping to surface more information will be the strong direction we go in.
Paul, you want to add to that?
Yeah, just comment on. I think it's a good point Stuart made about understanding how the business works. And certainly what we see, and I guess you guys agree, a lot of businesses are messed up. They're screwed up in how they work right now. How many times have you got home and went, "Argh," with the way that your business works? And I think that's important to understand, that any kind of top-down approach of trying to dictate and push this on from the business representative, from the business end, will lead to kind of user frustration. There's a law called Conway's Law. And Conway's Law states that any tool or service that an enterprise rolls out will be representative of the way that they're structured. And you see this time and time again. If people have a different video department and a different IT department and a different telecoms department, well, guess what? They end up with 3 solutions coming down. And I think we always have to be careful about the way that business, focusing on the way that business work rather than the way that users want to collaborate right now, and instead coming in from that end, from the user end, and building up from there.
So,
right.
I
just want to emphasize, when I say meeting users where they are, I mean in a couple of ways. Number one, meeting them where they are cognitively. So they have a certain mental model of how collaboration happens. You have to meet that where they are. And to some degree, we've trained people to think of things in very obscure ways. And so that's kind of how they appreciate it. But I also mean meeting people where they are. So for example, Jive is a customer of all of yours. And so it's not Jive or Microsoft, it's not Jive or Salesforce, it's really where the person is. So if I'm a sales ops person and I live in Salesforce, that's where I want to experience social collaboration. If I live in Microsoft, that's where I want to experience social collaboration. It can't be a destination, it has to be a way of working. So that's what I mean by meeting people where they are. So when I'm in Salesforce, I'm in Jive. When I'm in Microsoft, I'm in Jive. When I'm in Jive, I'm in Jive. When I'm in IBM, I'm in Jive. And that's really what we're trying to, that's our approach.
I think what you're illustrating here is a very interesting evolution of this industry, where initially you had off the premise, you had a couple standalone enterprise social networks, Jive being one of them, Jammer being another of them. And then you have examples like Salesforce that has been embedding social features and social feeds within their core applications. Can you maybe describe, from your perspective, the maybe pros and cons in this evolution from within Salesforce?
I think that's a great point. I think this notion of when you provide tooling that it is silos. What we've seen with social enterprise collaboration software is once that has been deployed, the users have created their own methods of collaboration that probably weren't even thought of when we first started this exercise. So someone like the Financial Times, which uses it across their internal employee base, they're solving problems, they're collaborating, they're creating new ideas, new groups, new ways of operating, and those were not even thought of when the tooling was deployed. And so I think that there is this innovation that happens that's just natural. That's how human beings operate. And I think that providing tools like Chatter across an enterprise has led to use cases that were probably not even perceived of when the organization started that journey.
I think a key there is, with regards to those tools and services, there's a tendency when they're deployed to be very to tweak all the admin knobs that you have on the system to set up the conversations in a different way. And I just want to link to the point that you're making there. I think the more open the platform is, the more likely it is that users themselves will feel ownership of those places and engage and find those new ways of working. I know that's something that when we did a usability test for Circuit, and we originally had an owner of a conversation. And we tested the engagement when there was an owner of a conversation. All we did was just hid the owner, so there was no owner of the conversation. Anyone could throw anyone else out. Anyone could add anyone else into the conversation. The engagement increased by 135% because people suddenly felt like it was their space rather than something else that someone else was controlling. So I think that's really important that we leave these platforms as open as possible, given the industry that you're in, given the regulatory requirements of that industry, to allow the users to innovate and collaborate in ways that suit them.
I think that's an interesting point. Recent IDC research, our 2015 survey results with over 1,400 respondents, showed that one of the most, one of the biggest challenges in deploying enterprise social networks internally is creating effective communities. To investigate this deeper, this is often as a result of too much control by leadership in terms of where, how these solutions have to be deployed. Stuart,
Yeah, but it's not only controlled by leadership, it's controlled by past precedent and the way people are working. As Kathryn just said, we've been training these people for years to work in a particular way. It's not just good enough to give them a tool that empowers them to work differently. That will work a little bit. The new generation millennials coming in, the new employees who haven't existed in that world maybe will be quicker to adopt this. But it's really important to go out and find ways to coach and mentor and enable and help employees to understand that hey, we're in a different world, that the role of HR in this company is now different. Their job is to make you engaged and interested and help you to learn how to work better with people to do what this company does better.
Corporate culture.
You're part of the solution.
I was going to say that's also inside the company, but also outside. So continuing on our side to innovate, what you can collaborate on socially internally as well as externally is key. We're pushing now the ability to take conversations on a flexible way to external people. I think about putting our presence at this event on. That involves full-time Microsoft employees. It involves contractors. The team who put it together want to work flexibly as to how they coordinate that space. So how we approach that, allowing external people to collaborate with internal people in the same space at the same time, is key. And that needs to be from a team perspective, not a top-down approach.
Absolutely. And Jive has been really focused on that area, on both, helping organizations start externally, helping them start internally, and of course, just having this boundaryless elements has been really, really critical. But you have to also address I know culture keeps coming up as a bit of a cliche, but the culture and how I recognize the culture. I've implemented literally hundreds of these at this point. And I inevitably, most of the time, will sit in a room with a bunch of people and we will play what if. What if somebody does this? What if somebody does that? What if this happens? What if that happens? And I tell them that we spend more time creating processes that never get implemented than then like we create all these processes just so people feel safe, but these things don't actually happen. The reality is social collaboration is a professional environment, and most people act very professionally in those environments. And the reality is that the reason people tweak those knobs is because there's a total lack of trust. And once you slowly start to let it out, people realize that people are not going to behave incredibly badly, and suddenly collaboration actually occurs. But that takes a long time for that to actually, for the organization to realize that people have the maturity to handle this and so on.
I think Jive is a good example of an organization that has had two different platforms and has been moving them both closer together. Jive X and Jive N now moving closer and closer together. Another one would be Salesforce. You know, the launch of the Communities Cloud, where the focus is much more on the external users, on the community, on the customers and partners, and how you extend your employees to work on that platform. Can you discuss perhaps the discussions you've had with customers around the what ifs? I'm curious how that's from a Salesforce
I think that's a great example. I think that, you know, tools like communities have been very, very effective to help organizations reach out. A great example is Just Giving. You know, this is an organization that helps charities. They've set up communities for over 13,000 charities, and what they're actually doing is helping these guys learn from each other, best practices, sharing, innovations, new ideas. I think creating ecosystems and platforms and communities for self-help, self-learning, self-service. I think all of those things are the way that we expect to be able to operate, and certainly Gen Y expects to operate in the future.
Richard.
Yeah, I think that external collaboration is key, but you've got to respect the enterprise boundaries. So that's not something about culture, that's just about the right levels of control. And those controls have to be visible to people. So to put them in a framework where they can operate doesn't mean you're going to restrict collaboration, but you're just going to point out to people, hey, if you're going to share this externally, here's a clear warning. That, I think, will allow people to share externally, but also show them where the safety limits are as to what they're doing.
Does that happen every time somebody emails something outside the organization? Do they get a little panel saying, warning, you're sharing information?
In modern email, absolutely. Yeah, it does. Seriously, it does. In modern email, it does. And I think users expect to see that. They want to be notified that this person's inside or outside of my organization. And then people can embrace it and be really confident it's what they're doing.
I think people know how to work outside the organization, and if they don't know how to work with their suppliers and their customers and their partners, then I think you've got a bigger problem than social collaboration on your hands. I do believe that people join an organization, they do terms and conditions, they certify every year on how to handle information. I don't believe that every piece of information should be open. Obviously, there's security that you want to enforce. But at the same time, you know, people know how to work with suppliers and customers, and I think we have to give them that
I actually think between you guys there's a balance. I think that, you know, there are things like HIPAA compliance and et cetera where, you know, you are enforced to comply with certain things. And I think that you have to do collaboration in that context. So understanding your business context.
Actually, Raj, that's not a balance. That's exactly what I said.
is pretty important, right?
But that's the heart of any kind of social collaboration, is about transparency. And that's transparency to the conversation internally, but if you're having an external conversation, transparency is to who it's with, and that everyone has that information. So that's also what solves the cultural adoption around social, is having that widespread transparency to the conversation, to what's happening, and that will foster pretty healthy communities.
And I think if the users themselves are the ones that have brought it in, or the line of business, rather than it coming from an IT dictated tool, there's much more willingness in the active community that are adopting it to want to self-police that.
So I'm wondering, we're here at the Unify Communications Expo, and we're primarily talking about social collaboration right now. In your views, I mean, UC is primarily dominated by a lot of the collaboration around voice and video. And as you described, Paul, you know, social is being considered as another silo. Where do you see the unification between all of these forms of collaboration come together? Yeah, go ahead.
I just think it's very relevant. When we went down the circuit journey, the brief that we got maybe 4 or 5 years ago was UC hasn't really taken off. Not just for us as we were then Siemens, but for the whole industry. And very quickly we realized that we needed to take a step back and work out what is a kick-ass business communication solution. And that didn't turn out to be just textual. It didn't turn out to be quick messages. Sometimes you need long, thoughtful ones. It didn't turn out to be just a great voice system. It's actually a combination of all these different modalities, the way we communicate in the real world. So I see in the future these the different modalities really coming together more, and the less of the boundaries between the modalities. Sometimes it's easier just talking to someone, but right now that's a completely different system. You lose a record of that. So with Circuit, we've organized everything around conversations, and whether it's voice, video, screen share, whether it's the social aspects, everything is stored within that single conversation, so you've got one place to go back to. So my vision would really be a human-driven unification of all these different modalities into a single space.
Right. Go ahead, Stuart.
Yeah. I think that's the right endpoint. It's what I was talking about before about designing from the end user in. They don't care if it's instant messaging or if it's an email. What's WhatsApp? Is that real time or store and forward? Who knows, right? And they don't care about the tools. Ultimately, they'll get a WhatsApp message and respond on Facebook messaging and not care the message went. So in the way people communicate, they don't care about the technologies. What we need to do, and what we're certainly trying to do with the stuff we've been doing recently, is rethink the whole process of employee communication from the employee in. How do you integrate online presence whenever you send a message to someone? If you read a post somebody's written on a blog, why can't you have a conversation with them in real time about it? So we're trying to create this unified user experience, which is about how do I do my business days? How do I track the tasks I need to do? How do I track the stuff I need to follow up on when people are coming back to me on? How do I link everything to do with a project together, wherever it is? Let it all stay out in different systems if necessary, but one common user interface. We're not going to get rid of the legacy document management systems and email boxes. You need one user interface that brings that together, and analytics will go and find the stuff and surface what you need to know right now.
Right.
I think often we get hung up on integration as technology providers and what integration means and what it doesn't mean. The one thing just on that same strand is it only matters from the end user's perspective. Having an integrated approach only matters if the end user can get more from it being integrated rather than separated. And I think that's where the focus needs to go. So whether it's bringing unified comms, IM, messaging, voice, video into it, you've got to show the users there's more value on having that integrated vision than there is from having best of breed. And I think that's where we're certainly going to try and take things.
I think that's interesting. You know, I think all of the conversations that happen, I think the key thing that needs to be relevant is the context. All of this needs to be integrated into the business process that you're actually evolving into. So within Salesforce, you know, the conversations are held either with accounts or contacts or communities or products. I think the important thing is building the richness of that feed so that you hold the collaboration, you hold the files, or you reach out to those files so that when a user is actually working, in the context that they're working, they have access to the information they need in one platform.
And can collaborate around it with other people.
Right. So I think, I mean, looking at Salesforce versus IBM and Microsoft, IBM and Microsoft has a broad range of solutions, a portfolio that can cover content management as well as, you know, many of the enterprise applications and the collaboration solutions. Whereas Salesforce, in many of these adjacent processes relies on ISVs to supply these integrations to its end users. So, I mean, from your perspective, would you say there's a direct benefit or disadvantage for users in having this fragmented approach to their collaboration environment?
Yeah, you know, I think we've kind of lived through this whole scenario of is it a single platform or is it best of breed? And I think it kind of, you know, goes in each way. I think now with cloud, I think the speed at which integration happens, the speed at which innovation happens within ecosystems, I think we're away from, you know, having one monolithic, you know, piece of software to actually being able to work much more effectively across the different application landscapes.
Yeah, I think if you look what we've done recently with our integrations on competitive platforms, non-Microsoft platforms, shows you that exact same point. You have to go where users are going to be comfortable. You have to take your API strategy to a place where other people can integrate, because it's a much more dynamic world now.
And tomorrow I'm actually going to be talking more at length on a topic which is the future of work. And one of the really strong trends is around freelancers and how many people will be working in your enterprise who aren't even employees. And it's one thing when you set up an infrastructure to say, you know, all our employees must work within this framework. But then if you want the best of the freelancers, if you want the best of the contractors, if you want to be able to have people come into your organization, deliver value and leave, you can't be telling them, oh, you have to use all of these things and let us set you up with your IT department to have them get you on the project, because by the time that happens, the project's over. So having a much more malleable, flexible infrastructure is going to be critical.
Right. Talking about the future, I just want to, since we have a couple more left, a couple more minutes left, talk about the future really of enterprise social collaboration. Enterprise social networks and standalone platforms have existed for a couple years now. We've seen great success stories, but also many organizations have failed miserably. Partly because of not being able to create these effective communities, lacking the exposure or the ability to present business value, and not being able to integrate all of these systems. But going forward into the future, Stuart, could you maybe explain a little bit how you envision this area to evolve?
Yeah, so there's a quote from Clay Shirky I use sometimes when he talks about information overload, and he says we don't really suffer from information overload, we suffer from filter failure. And it's an old Microsoft term about information at your fingertips, right? What we need is, this is the future of collaboration. It's definitely not laptop shaped. It looks like this, it's in people's hands, and it will make the information they need available to them whenever they need it, and then allow them to comment on it, bring it to other people's attention, collaborate around it, in a way that's much more about what the user wants in and much less about where the information happens to be stored or how it's communicated.
Richard?
Yeah, no, I think, look, just building what we said earlier, when we look at machine learning, inside Office 365, we have the Office Graph. Last 6 months, 6 billion signals into the Office Graph to help users find more relevant content and discover more. You need that kind of technology to power a mobile-first world that's going to be cross-platform. We're going to have to take more of that technology to help end users be more productive.
Paul, I was wondering, Unify obviously comes from a heavy networking and telecommunications background. Does IBM's story resonate with Unify's perspective?
I think with regards to the overload and the information overload, we all know that we're suffering that, and it's important that to drive adoption, that people aren't seeing it as an onerous task getting involved. That is going to increase the amount of information that they get, that they have to process. And I think the key to doing that is actually changing the thinking from transactional exchanges of information, which is more what IM is, more what emails is. It's kind of a backwards and forwards, to one based around conversations and one that's much more natural. And I think because of that, people already know how to kind of handle the flow of conversations, when to step out, when not to, when to be involved. So moving away from transactions and poking to services where users can engage when it suits them, and having the controls to turn that off and on. From the networking side and our telecoms background, it's important as well that any tools and services are understanding your status on other modalities. If you're on a call, that is a different state that you want your textual communication system, if it's separate, to be able to handle and understand the context in which you're in to deliver relevant information for you.
Talking about mobile, I just want to highlight Jive and Salesforce here, because I think both have a particular approach. Jive has recently launched a number of separate applications that very much relies on the broader Jive and Jive X platform, whereas Salesforce, with its Salesforce One app, tries to integrate everything within one user experience. Could you, Jive, first maybe elaborate on what was your I think point of departure when deciding to have separate applications for all these various use cases in collaboration?
Well, with us, it wasn't so much that we went in a different direction, but we just expanded. So in addition to having a very comprehensive platform in the Jive or the Jive platform, we also decided that some companies really just want to start with something very simple. They just want to address the issue of, let's say, employee communications, or they just want to address the issue of text, or they just want to address the issue of employee directory. How do we create a mobile-first, consumer-light experience that allows them to just implement that one application while starting to, of course, Jive, very much focused on things like the social graph, understanding how to bring all of that together once the customer then piles on more applications. But it was just a really easy way to start simply with one app.
Primarily basically for user adoption to improve
exactly,
that.
Exactly.
Right.
And it's targeted at, now very small organizations, medium-sized organizations are looking at these technologies more closely than they would if they were looking at a sort of something more monolithic.
Raj?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. When we first started our mobile journey about 5 or 6 years ago, we had separate apps. We had Salesforce Chat, we had Salesforce Analytics, we had dashboards. I think we came quickly to realize that if you really want to run your business from your phone, you really need a single UI experience. You need access to be able to extend additional applications, just like you get with current apps today like Facebook or others, where you can plug in other applications as you need. So you can start small and you can extend, but you have a single UI, a single experience, a single place to go. And I think to the point that was being made earlier, I think the mobile is here to stay, and we are driving our businesses and the way we operate much more via the phone, and we'll continue to do that. But also, the Apple Watch is being released very soon. That is another technology that will revolutionize the way enterprises interact. And I think that when we think about social collaboration today, we're talking about the human aspects of it, but I think very quickly there will be the machine-to-machine aspects of what collaboration really means as well. And I think gearing up for that really helped us kind of completely reinvent our platform to be API first and to be mobile first.
Right. So I think there are a couple of schools of thought in terms of how at least the success of mobile devices has really launched off. From a consumer perspective, applications have been primarily adopted best of breed. And you had many fragmented point solutions, whereas from a enterprise perspective, you're seeing much more use cases being jammed into one experience. Unify comes from a background that is primarily focused on communications and a little bit less on the enterprise applications space. Could you elaborate on your view on the future of this?
Just to comment on that, we're already seeing with Facebook as well, they're pulling Messenger out the application as well. So even in the consumer space, we're seeing people trying to simplify the user experience by pulling those elements apart. One of the challenges that we've had is because Circuit is such a broad suite of different capabilities, ranging from the voice to screen share, to the social elements. People come along and in their head they want to buy a screen sharing solution, and Circuit has great screen sharing capabilities into it, but it's got all these other things as well. And we certainly have dealing with the complete multimodality. It's been interesting for us of trying not to overwhelm customers and users when we first engage with them. They've asked for one thing and it's got this, but it's also got this, and this on there. So that's just one of the challenges that we're working through right now. Of course, once customers actually get it in their hand, having that in one platform without having to go and get another app and having to go and subscribe to another service massively helps, because it's already in one place and they just suddenly open up they wanted to use it for screen sharing, but you know what, day 2 they've opened up a little community where they're starting to share stuff. Day 3 they're running their conferences off that. So I think it goes both ways, and we're definitely seeing that kind of sitting in the middle. We're seeing advantages both ways.
So we've run out of time, but I want to give everyone a last opportunity just to summarize in their view how their solution can help the audience in deploying in a social collaboration environment. Stuart.
Yeah, so it's all about the user experience. Our IBM Verse is about creating a work environment, a new way to work, an environment that supports employees doing their jobs better and therefore delivers better for their organizations.
Just from a Microsoft perspective, I think we're going to be in this hybrid world for a while where some users are more comfortable in some tools than others. And it's about how we bring those two worlds together so you can foster collaborations from different sets of users on different parts of this journey.
I think from our point, it's kind of building a platform that allows you to connect your employees, your partners, your customers together to really create a combined success.
So I'm not a sales guy, so I'd give a rubbish pitch. So go to www.circuit.com and sign up for the free trial and try it out for yourself and see what you think.
And I agree with just being able to work across the spectrum, but it's meeting people where they are, being able to work from anywhere, any place, anytime.
All right. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for your attention. Cheers.